Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Gore, congrats on first, and thank you for the lurk. Much appreciated. I hope you're doing well. Um, Let me get some music started. Okay. Okay. So, today, the real Vivian. Ayo! Nice to be here. Thank you. Nice to have you here. How are you doing today? Welcome. So, welcome to another session of. Why is the brush always so huge? To another session of tabletop role-playing game design. It's a very unwieldy name. I may have to find a better name for it. But yeah, today we are going to mess up the canvas. And then how can I drag this? We're going to homebrew. Kinda. So, a little bit of background first. Why this topic today? So I realized I have been going through what 4 sessions of designing what is basically the same game previously, and while I'm not done, I thought a change of pace would be nice, right? Because not just for I don't know the stream or so. Hey, Vanilla, hi, how are you doing? Uh, Nice to see you. Let me do this. That working? Yeah. Yeah, Vanilla, very comfy VTuber, my VTuber brother. Here to lurk and listen to your designing? Okay. Ooh, highlights. Yeah. Um, where was I? You distracted me, Vanilla. No, it's all good. Always a joy having you here. So yeah, like I was saying, I was designing the same basic game for a whole bunch, and while it's still not finished, and I will return to it because it is a game that I think I will want to play. So I want to finish designing it. Um, my own design thoughts right now have been occupied with a different role-playing game. Hi Joe, thank you for the redeems. Okay, I will do as you say. I have some chocolate milk tea because it is breakfast for me. Breakfast at noon. Isn't that great? Um right, so I have been thinking a lot about a different role-playing game. Is this gonna adjust? There, that's a bit better. Okay. That I also want to play. What's on today's agenda? Yes. Today's agenda, having tea, but it's 12:30, 12:50 noon. Same. Also gonna lurk? Alright, thank you, Joe. Thanks for the lurk. So, on today's agenda, there is this role-playing game called Numenera. And yes, this accent is on the name. Designed by Monty Cook Games, which is a studio run by a fellow called, unsurprisingly, Monty Cook. A few other people, Bruce R. Cordell, Sean K. Reynolds, Shanna Germain, and so on. And it's a game that made quite a big splash in the. Thank you for that. Thank you, Vanilla. That reminds me, I need to create some custom bits and alerts as well. Um, at at oil, thank you. Oh, and thank you for the follow, the real Vivian. Welcome to the guild. So, Numenera. This game came out in 2013 and made quite a big splash in the not necessarily in the mainstream RPG community, but also not the completely niche indie RPG community. It's falls somewhere in between. It's one of those names, kind of like when you have heard of other RPGs existing beyond D&D, right? Some people who have heard a bit down the grapevine can name things like Call of Cthulhu, can maybe name things like Cyberpunk, especially with the video games and the Netflix series, right? And can maybe name one or two more. And like on the B tier list of that group, that's a very, very specific group, is Numenera. It's big enough that some people may actually have heard of what it became later on, and that is the Cypher system. Cypher system. So maybe some people have heard of this name instead, or heard of other games that run on the Cypher system, like The Strange. Is the first big one, and essentially Numenera came out in 2013, and because of its big success, was turned into a universal system called the Cypher system. Now, I am here today to homebrew this game. For a big reason. First off, what is the pitch of Numenera? The pitch of Numenera is the following. You are playing on Earth. You are playing normal. No, not normal, but you're playing humans on Earth, but Earth 1 billion years in the future. Yes, 1 billion. As in an unimaginably long time. And the idea is that in the intervening billion years, 8 great civilizations have risen and fallen. And by great civilizations, we mean things like a civilization that was the capital of an interstellar empire, a civilization that the human race still alive then? Surprisingly so. And why is one of the mysteries or one of the weird things about the setting, right? That's a very good point. Yeah, humans, more or less like modern humans today, are alive on Earth in a billion years. Very good point. Right, so capital of an interstellar empire. A civilization that has achieved stellar lifting, as in moving and manipulating stars, which is also why our sun has not ballooned into a red giant and swallowed the Earth, right? Because one of those civilizations manipulated our sun to not do that. They had the technology. They could do things like play around with gravity, with space time, right? With other dimensions and all of that. So, technology that to us would seem like magic or just far out sci-fi that we can't even imagine how to do, right? And now it's the ninth world, right? People say it's the ninth world. There were these 8 great civilizations, and there are humans living there, and they are surrounded by all of these marvels that the previous civilizations have left behind, right? They have changed the Earth completely, shifted around the continents to their whim. They have been to the moon and done weird stuff over there. They've colonized other planets and so on. Built strange devices, left behind fields where gravity is weird, left behind portals to other worlds, and so on and so forth. And these humans, with their medieval level technology, right, live essentially in a magical scavenger world where everything is artificial from some previous civilization. The mountains are actually huge structures built by someone else. The dirt and dust is actually ground down bits of structures or objects that have been returned to the earth, so to speak. There are plants and animals that have been infused with machinery or biogenetically engineered or summoned from other dimensions, etc., etc., etc. And in this setting come the player characters who are ordinary people by the setting standards and are surrounded by this wonderful technology that they have no hope of truly understanding, but maybe have some hope of using to better their lives, right? And better the lives of their community and so on. So this is the setting. This is the elevator pitch. I talked a bit more than an elevator ride, but yeah, that's the basic pitch of Numenera. And I absolutely love it. It is so amazing. The system is so full of weird and wonderful stuff. It runs on Clarke's Arthur C. Clarke's third law. Um, any I forgot any technology, any advanced sufficiently yeah, any sufficiently advanced technology. There we go. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's basically Numenera in a nutshell, right? So it's all about you go out and you experience all of these weird and wonderful things, find all of the strange technology, and then see how you can maybe use it to your benefit or to the benefit of your community, and so on. Um, and it's an amazing setting, and the books do an amazing job of selling you this setting. Monty Cook is, I don't know if he was just born with drugs in his veins or if his brain is just otherworldly. The things he dreams up are so amazingly weird, but at the same time you look at that and go, I want to explore this. I want to find out more. I want to go there and just be in the space and tell stories and discover things. The line between magic and technology is blurred. um well, it is blurred insofar that the technology is so advanced that it seems like magic to us. Right? It's kind of the idea of if you take a modern smartphone and bring it back to, I don't know, ancient Rome, right? And then you show, look, I have this tiny block and it can play music, right? It can shine a light. It can show you moving images, right? And it can store all of my books. I can have 50 libraries stored in this little block of metal and other materials you don't know of. Does an EMP still work? That's a good question. It's not clear, right? Like EMP is too Stone Age for that setting, so to speak. Like our most modern technology nowadays is to those civilizations what a sharpened stick is to us. Essentially, that's the level we're talking about here. So you're not, when you're playing this game and like telling stories in this setting, you're not meant to understand the technology, because if you start understanding that technology, you've missed the point of the setting. Right? The point is not to understand how these civilizations work, because you can't. They are so advanced, their scientific knowledge was so beyond anything we could ever hope to achieve, that uh, that's not the point, right? The point is you take these strange things and you try to somehow make them work and use them again. But it is pretty clear that the way you're using them is not necessarily the intended usage or its original purpose, right? If someone in ancient Rome found a smartphone, they would probably use it as a light source and nothing else. If they found a car battery, they would use it as an acid canister, right? If they found a CD, they would use it as a mirror. They don't know what these things are. They don't know what they're for. They don't can never hope to understand them, but they have some use, and that's the thing you're doing. So we're using the technology just for the sake of using it. Well, for the sake of improving your lives, right? If you're living in a medieval world and you're going, well, life is hard, right? So you use this technology, or you just benefit from whatever it happens to be doing to make your life a bit easier, right? If you have this strange device and you know if I press this button, the device warms up. I don't know what it's for. I don't know what its purpose was. I don't know what else it does. I just know if I press this button, it heats up, and if I press it again, it cools down. Okay, then you use it as a heat source, right? And and you can, I don't know, cook food with it, warm homes with it, and so on, and improve the lives of yourself and the people around you. That's the idea behind it, right? Um, because this world, the idea is not that people invent things on their own as so much as scavenge all of this technology that's lying around and use it as tools. Double-edged sword, but we don't know it's a double-edged sword. Um, I mean, people know that Numenera probably like, and the by the way, the name Numenera comes from this technology, this lost technology, right? Or this technology that's just lying around, right? These devices and appliances and things, machines, etc., are called the Numenera. That's where the name comes from. People know that Numenera sometimes have side effects, or they have disastrous outcomes that could maybe happen. Probably, we don't know, right? um, but as long as it works for now, right? We use it. It's very much it's kind of, it's not quite post-apocalyptic, but it has flavors of that, with a lot of the old world lefts lying around, and you build up your life from that, right? Um, Again, imagine you're in ancient Rome, or you're in the Stone Age, right? You're in the Stone Age and you find a smartphone. You have no idea what this thing is. You have no hope of ever explaining what this thing is, of ever understanding what it truly is. But you know, if you press this one button, it lights up for a couple of seconds. And then it's like, oh, I have a light source. Awesome. And then you use it as a light source. And then 3 days later, it just no longer works. And you go, okay, now I have a fragile rock. Awesome. Right. And then you toss it, and then you go find something else. Right. That kind of deal. Or you find a plastic bottle, right? In the Stone Age. It's like, oh, what is that? Or a plastic bag. And it's like, oh, if I wear this on my head while it rains, I stay dry. Oh, that's awesome. And then you do that. Things like that, right? um, so it's an amazing setting. It takes maybe a bit of an intuitive leap to get into it, especially once you get to some of the more weird aspects of it. But I absolutely love the setting, and I really do want to play in it and tell stories in it and such. Now, the Numenera effectively runs on the Cypher system. Right? Yes, Numenera came first, but the rules of Numenera were, with very little change, adapted to the Cypher system, which is a universal system. Right? As in, you can use it to run more or less any genre that you want. Um, I think the Cypher system is pretty solid. It has some really good ideas. It's pretty simple, and has a couple of innovations that are really really cool. However, very ironically, I don't think the Cypher system is a good fit for Numenera, even though Numenera is where this system came from, right? So, uh, premise, and this is very very ironic. I think, right, for my personal opinion of the games I like to play, of the rule sets I like to use, etc., I think the Cypher system is a bad fit for Numenera. And I wrote a super, super, super long post on Tumblr about this, trying to get my thoughts in order, trying to understand why. And also, if I want to homebrew it, which parts I want to change, which parts I just don't like. So, how does the Cypher system work? How does Numenera actually work, right? I've explained the setting. How does the system work? So, the system, and here it helps to know a little bit about Monty Cook's background as a game designer. Monty Cook is known for two things in his game design career, two big things. The first one, and probably the bigger one, is his D&D setting Tallis, um, which is an amazing setting. And there is a pattern here. It's a crazy good setting, very well detailed, and essentially he said, okay, D&D as a system, with its magic system, with its classes and heritages and social structures and mechanics and such, it implies a certain kind of setting, right? What setting would that be? And that setting turned out to be Tallis, right? A setting where magic is every place, where is commonplace and every day, where people might not be mages themselves, but they have seen so much magic that they're just like, it's just not, it's just another thing, right? Oh, there's the Tallis is a city, and it's like, oh yeah, there's laws against using fire magic in the city specifically, right? Because that could lead to burn, like infernos in the city, or um, when you have courts, you use like zones of truth and other spells to make sure that when people talk about what they've done or what they've witnessed, that they tell the truth. Um, People, when they bar their doors, right? The bars have a certain weight because certain spells can lift up to, like a mage hand, a very simple spell can lift up to 10 pounds, I think. So all the bars used to bar it and keep the door closed are at least 11 pounds. Things like that, right? So a lot of these things to really deconstruct and reconstruct the setting that is implied by the mechanics of D&D. So he's an amazing setting designer. There's a pattern. The other big thing he's known for is being one of the 3 lead designers for the 3rd edition of D&D. So he is one of the people who created the D20 system that we have today. And the D20 system kind of sort of lives on in 5th edition D&D as well. Right? It's not exactly how it was in 3rd edition, but a lot of elements live on. So he is one of the big people who crafted the foundation of D20, of the D20 system and D&D 3rd edition. Similar thing, it was crafted for D&D and then became a universal system with the D20 system. All right, there is an ad starting soon, so I don't want to start any new points. But yeah, this background for Monty Cook is important. He is amazing at designing intricate and well-crafted settings. Right. Talis is one, Numenera is one. He crafted another one after that, Invisible Sun, which is also really, really good. And he is one of the architects of the D20 system as we know it today, and which still persists through the legacy of D&D. Right, and both these points are important.
Endure. In enduring,
okay, the ad hit. Ooh. Oh, I still have some food left. Right. Use the ad break to eat it. It's like, it's past noon, but I treat it as breakfast because I get up relatively late, especially today. Last night I just could not sleep. I was just lying in bed awake, and at some point I checked the clock and it's like 3:30 a.m. So, yeah. Every now and then insomnia strikes. I same slept at 2, woke at 5. Ooh. Oh no. Did you have something in the morning to wake up that early, or did it just happen? That sounds really, really rough though. It happened. Oh no, then I do hope that you'll be able to get some rest, some better rest later today. Considering I have psychology class, oof. Oh man, then yeah. Good luck on that. Sincerely. All right. So, like I said, Monty Cook, great at designing fantastical settings, fantastical in the best sense of the word, and one of the lead architects of D&D 3rd edition, and with that, the D20 system. Why is this important? Because we see, first off, Numenera, an amazing setting, and the Cypher system, we see a lot of D20 in there. And it's very interesting to see how people talk about and review the Numenera system, the Cypher system. There are those who have basically only played D&D, somehow discovered Numenera because it became really, really big. There's also a video game, Torment Ties of Numenera, based on the system. And then they really love the system. Say, oh my goodness, so many cool innovations, so rules light, it's amazing, right? And then you have some people who don't come from the D&D side, like me, who have played like 20, 30, 40, 50 different games, or looked at that many games, read that many games, etc., and then look at Numenera and go, yeah, that's nice. Right? So That's because Numenera straddles this line of, if you are aware of it, it's very, very clearly inspired by D20, by the D20 system, by D&D, and it still has a lot of very clear relics of that in there. But it has enough innovations to cover that up. Right? So, how does the system work? Well, in Numenera, you have the core resolution mechanic. Right? So the core resolution mechanic. That's a big thing to always look for when you're looking at a game. How does it work? Well, in a core resolution mechanic, the basic idea is you roll a d20 and you hit or beat a certain target number. Now, what is this target number? This target number is determined by the GM. I can write that better. Determined by GM, right? Much like in many, many other role-playing games, right? Say, I want to sneak past the guard. I want to pick this lock. I want to haggle for a better price. I want to climb this cliff. Right? Then the GM says, okay, it's going to be this and that difficulty. And then you roll. Very, very similar. And how this then works is the GM determines some difficulty from 1 to 10. Some level from 1 to 10. And the actual target number is this times 3. So if it's a difficulty 1 task, the target number is 3. So on a d20, you have to roll 3 or higher, which is quite possible, right? 90% chance of it happening. But it's only level 1 task, right? It's just the simplest task there is. Something like a level 4 task would be difficulty 12. So you need to roll a 12 or higher. A level 8 task would be difficulty 24. Hold on. 24? You cannot roll a 24 on a d20. What do you do? This is the core of Numenera. The core of Numenera is players have various abilities or various things, right? They have abilities, training, assets, or effort, and so on to lower this difficulty. So if you say, okay, I want to sneak past the guard, and the GM says, okay, that's a difficulty 5 task, right? The guards are on high alert right now because of what has happened, blah, 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 blah. Difficulty 5 task. The player goes, aha, but my character is skilled in stealth. Okay, I'm skilled in stealth. That means I can reduce it from a difficulty 5 task to a difficulty 4 task. And then instead of having to roll a 15 or higher, right, 5 times 3, I roll 4 times 3, a 12 or higher. I have a much better chance of making this. And if I then say, but I have this Numenera that I found, these special sound-sucking boots, right? These boots that reverse sound. They don't let out any sound. They suck it all up, and everything around me is slightly more silent. It's like, yes, you did find that. Okay, that's an asset. You can lower the difficulty by 1 more point. So now you're rolling a difficulty 3 task, which is a 9 or higher. And then you can say, aha, but I wish to spend effort. I want to spend some points from my speed skill or my speed attribute. I put in some effort into sneaking to make it easier for me. Okay, so you lower the difficulty by yet another step from a level 3 down to a level 2, and now you only have to roll a 6 or higher. And that's the basic conceit of Numenera. Right? You have a task that you want to do, or some check that you want to do. The GM gives you difficulty. And then, if you wish, you can try various different things to lower that difficulty in your favor, and then make the actual roll. You could still fail a difficulty 2 task, right? A 1 to 5 would fail that. But the chances are much, much, much better than a difficulty 5. And this is how you deal with the higher difficulties. If the GM says, yeah, this is a difficulty 8 task, you cannot do this. You cannot roll a 24 on a d20. Right? And then you go through the same process saying, yeah, but I have this skill. But I'm spending effort. But I have this asset. Or someone else says, but I'm helping. Right? And then you lower the difficulty step by step. And then go to, okay, I've lowered it from difficulty 8 down to difficulty 5. It's still difficult, but it is possible. Right? And that's the basic conceit. That is the core resolution mechanic and kind of the core mechanic for Numenera. Right? And it is a really, really elegant system because it integrates a lot of different things. It integrates things like players looking at it. It looks at both what skills do I have as a character, but also what's in my environment. Is anything in my environment that could help? Am I carrying an item that could help? Is some other PC going to help me with this task? Right? If you're trying to, I don't know, breach a door, right? Push open a door that's stuck, right? Then you go, okay, I'm pushing it, and some other person goes, well, the door is probably wide enough for 2 people to push at once. I'm helping, and then the difficulty becomes slightly easier, and so on, right? So it's both looking on your character sheet and looking at the environment, looking at being actually in the story, in the narrative, to see what can help you. And that's a pretty genius move. I like that. And so that's the core system, and that's really well done. Right? It does some things that is not really seen in other games. That means some people might feel weird about it. Basically, the thing I mentioned with effort, where you spend speed points to sneak, or you can spend might points to push open a door, or things like that, or you can spend intellect points to analyze a machine, and so on and so forth. Those are points that you actively spend, but that's also kind of sort of your hit points, right? So when you take damage, various types of damage, it also gets deducted from your might or your speed or your intellect, right? So that's a bit strange. It's using your hit points to make tasks easier, and some players have a bit of a hard time wrapping their head around that or embracing that system. Nevertheless, it is an elegant system, and determining a difficulty between 1 and 10 is it's pretty easy, right? Especially if you know that 10 is quite difficult to reach, quite difficult to lower as well. And that's really, really good. The other thing that Numenera does that is really interesting on the surface level is how you like explain what character you have. If you play D&D, for instance, you can say, "Oh, I am a dwarven Oath of Vengeance paladin," or something like that. Right? It's been a while since I looked at D&D. And if you play the game, right, then you know exactly what that means. Numenera uses something a bit different. So Numenera uses a system of I am a something something who something. And what are these? So this is called a descriptor. This is called a type. And this is called a focus. And you pick these 3 things to craft your character. So I am a clever glaive who rides the lightning. Or I am a uh, swift delve who howls at the moon. Moon. Or I am a what else is there? A tough Jack who shreds the walls of the world. And you look at these and you go, huh, what the heck do these mean? And that's kind of the point. These are extremely evocative, right? So and because of that, they are extremely flavorful. Right? You can kind of say, okay, clever, swift, tough. Yeah, no, I understand what those mean. Glaive, delve, jack, might need some explaining. Rides the lightning, howls at the moon, shreds the walls of the world. What is going on here? Right? What are these? And this really helps sell the setting, right? Because your descriptor is just a basic adjective of what kind of attitude you generally bring to the world, right? Are you a clever person, swift person, a tough person, a benevolent person, a charming person, a rugged person, whatever, right? There's a whole bunch, and it's relatively easy to create your own. Then type is essentially your character class. Glaive is someone who focuses on martial prowess, right? Combat. Delve is someone who focuses on exploration. Jack is someone who is a bit of a jack of all trades, right? And can do a bit of everything and is very flexible in their skills. And then the focus is something of a special ability that you can pick independent of all the others. Like all of these are independent of each other. You have a list of descriptors, pick any one. List of types, pick any one. List of foci, pick any one. And you can wildly combine them. Right? You can completely focus on things like I am a tough glaive who masters weaponry. Okay, I'm going 150% into combat. Okay, you can do that. Or you can be this, a clever glaive who rides the lightning. So I focus a little bit more on my mental prowess as someone who's combat focused. And then my special powers are lightning powers, electricity powers. Right? You can do that. So this is a really, really flexible system that is very evocative and flavorful, and gives players a lot of different possible choices without necessarily overwhelming them. Right? So you can say, oh, what kind of character do you want to be? It's like it's possible to create a character in like 5 to 10 minutes. It's like, oh, I want to be a really strong person, but who is also who uses magic or what passes as magic in this world, and who's really good with using machines. Okay, then you can be a strong nano. Nano is a person who has infused Numenera or nanotechnology that allows them to create magical effects, effectively magical effects, who talks to machines. Done. Right? And that's how this works. Um, and this is a really, really cool system on the surface. There's a caveat. On the surface, it's a really, really cool system. Now, and these are the things I like. There's also one more innovation that I really like. That is more a small thing, but I'm just gonna put it in here, mentioned here, and that is called the GM intrusion. The GM intrusion is something you can put into basically any game. And a GM intrusion is something the game master can use to manipulate the narrative. And you're saying, what are you talking about? The GM already has full power to manipulate the narrative however they want. That's kind of why they're the GM. Yes, but GM intrusions allow them to buy player goodwill when manipulating the narrative. So things like, if the example that's used in the book again and again, and it makes good sense. If, for example, a player attacks some animals with a thick hide or something, and they bash their axe into it and deal a whole bunch of damage, like, I got a really good hit. And then as a GM, you think, yeah, but what if your axe got stuck in this thick hide of this animal? Right? And as the animal runs away to ready for another charge, it pulls your axe with it, and now you've been disarmed. Usually, if you just do that as a GM and tell the player, your axe got stuck and now it's got wrenched out of your hands and is still stuck in the hide of this animal. Sucks to be you. And the player will go, what kind of BS is this? I'm done playing. Right? Rightfully so. What a GM intrusion does is the GM can say, yo, I have here an experience point for you. Right? And experience points, single experience points are worth a lot. And D&D would probably be something like, I don't know, 50 XP or 100 or whatever you want to scale it to, right? So I have some experience points here for you. Would you like your axe to get stuck? And then the player can say, okay, do I take that the experience, right, and give my character a resource to grow? Or do I want to keep my axe? Right now, right? And essentially it allows the GM to negotiate these these changes or twists in narrative that might negatively impact a player character, but then sweeten the deal by saying, yeah, if this dumb thing happens to you, if this crappy thing happens to you, your character learns from the experience, right? Quite literally, and gains some experience points to level up. And then as a player, you now have a choice, and you can say, oh, do I want, right, the bonus now or the bonus later, and so on. And that's a really, really elegant system. So that's a big innovation that you could actually put into any game, right? You could put that into D&D if you want. You can put that into many other games, right? You sweeten the deal by making the story more interesting, introducing twists, and so on. So these are the three big parts. No, it's not three big parts. GM intrusions are not a big part of Numenera, but the core resolution mechanic and the whole how do you describe characters, right, are the two big parts of Numenera. There is a third part. This is already the third part. You know what? Let me put this in parentheses. And that part is what the cipher system is named for, and that's the ciphers. What are ciphers? So ciphers in Numenera are single-use Numenera, right? Weird technology that PCs find virtually everywhere. So, for example, a cipher that acts like some sort of grenade, right? You press a button, you throw it, and then it explodes. A cipher that is like a little screen that allows you to look through a wall for an hour or so is also a cipher. Or a cipher that is, I don't know, a small pen-sized thing, and you click a button and it suddenly expands to a very stable and sturdy rod that is 100 meters long, right? And then after 10 minutes, it collapses again and brittles and falls to dust or whatever, right? So a lot of these strange things, that these are the bits and pieces of technology, right? This is what Numenera is. You find all of these strange bits and pieces of technology. You don't know what they're actually for, but you know they have some sort of use, and then you can use them in your adventures. Um, the whole point here is that, and this gets said in the books as well, the GM is encouraged to put these everywhere. Again, that's kind of the point of the setting, right? These are everywhere. So if the PCs just go through an adventure or something, they should find many, many, many of these ciphers. But in the same vein, the PCs can only carry a limited amount of ciphers with them at any one time. So a single character can carry something like 2 or 3 ciphers with them at any one time. If they want to pick up more, they start getting effects akin to, like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or strange mechanical things of all these weird devices being in close proximity too long, right? Or they have to drop or use them. So it's really a use them constantly kind of idea, right? Because you will find more. It's an anti-hoarding measure. And the point of these ciphers is to give the PCs constantly rotating new single-use abilities. Kind of like spell scrolls, if you think about it, right? In a fantasy setting, for example. It's like you find various scrolls with strange, weird spells on them. And you can only use them once, then the scroll is destroyed. And you can only carry so many scrolls around with you, but uh, you know, they're everywhere, right? Or potions in a similar vein, things like that. And that's what these are. And it's like, if only we had some sort of big fire thing that could burn through this door. And then you look, oh, wait, I have a cipher here. It's this weird thing. It's like a chalk, and you draw on it somewhere, and then after a minute of being exposed to air, it like starts burning really bright and really hot, and then it burns through the stuff. Like, oh, okay, so let's paint that on the door, and then it burns through the door, and then the chalk is used up. Done. But you had this ability as part of your character, and then you go through the door, and then you stumble upon your next cipher. It's like, oh yeah, it looks like a small metallic sphere the size of an apple. Okay, what's it do? If you press the button, it will show you what happened here 24 hours ago or something, right? At the place you are right now. It's like, oh, okay, that could potentially be useful, right? And so on and so forth, right? And so you get all these strange abilities that can be super overpowered because the players can only use them once. Right? And that's the idea behind this. It makes the whole game more interesting. It makes players feel competent and powerful without completely throwing the game out of whack. And that's very, very good. That's very, very elegant. I like that a lot. So, if this game, if the cipher system has so many things that I really, really like, why do I still think it's a bad fit for Numenera? Why do I want to homebrew it? Right? That's the $5 question here. Right? Am I grabbing this? So, if the cipher system has so many good core components, and these 3 are core components, right? Why homebrew? Or not, why is it a bad fit? Why homebrew? Why am I capitalizing this? Right? So essentially, I've done this to look at what do I like about the system? What do I want to keep? What aspects do I want to keep? In some way, shape, or form. Now we go into what do I not like about the system? What do I want to change? And this is really what you should do when you homebrew. You should look at which parts do I like, right? Depending on how deep you homebrew, or you just look at what do I not like. That's the first big step. And there are several things I do not like about the system, and I think they are impactful enough, right? Integrated enough and big enough that it warrants change. It warrants like I can't just ignore them or so. I need to change them to make the game enjoyable for me. But again, an ad is going to start soon. So I'm not going to start listing them and then have the ad just cut me off mid-sentence. Right. So in fact, I need to use this break to go to the bathroom real quick. So, where's my mouse?
Endure. In enduring
Music,
grow
pause the
strong.
music. Go to be right back. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. All right. So why homebrew? Now, when you're looking at homebrewing, right? Change homebrewing. That word has multiple meanings. I mean homebrewing right now as changing. Welcome back. Thank you. Changing something in the mechanics, in the system, in the rules of the game, right? So I don't mean homebrewing in the sense of building your own setting or writing your own adventures or so. Those are also called homebrewing. That's not what I'm talking about here. I also don't mean homebrewing in the sense of changing character options, right? So limiting what classes characters can pick, or creating a new class, or a new heritage, or something like that, right? If you say, I don't like dwarves, so you cannot play dwarves in my game, right? Yes, that is changing things different from how the rules in the book presented, and you could call that home brewing, maybe. But that's not what I'm talking about. Or like, oh, I really wish there was some kind of class that, I don't know, mixed divine magic and arcane magic, and I'm gonna design something so that players can do that. Or maybe a player asks for a class like that, right? Is there something like a mystic thurge, which is an old class in D&D Third Edition, by the way, um, that combines arcane magic and divine magic, and then you can work together and design something that works. Um, yes, that is also a type of homebrewing, but that's also not what I'm talking about, because that's just providing player options. Right? It's not a systemic change. It's changing the content, not the framework. No, what I'm talking about is actually changing parts of the mechanics, parts of the system, in to fit what your table, your group might enjoy more. Right. So when asking about homebrew, when checking for homebrew, first, of course, the implied question is, what do I not like? Right? That's kind of a given, because you wouldn't really homebrew something that you do like, right? Maybe you do. So let me change this. What do I want? Let me write it all out again. What do I want to change? Right? Sometimes you do like something, but you might want to enhance it somehow or make it even better, right? That's also possible, now that I think about it. Um, but that's kind of a given, right? When you're homebrewing something, you already have a target in mind of something you want to change. Right? Um, but then there are two questions you have to ask. The first question is, why do I want to change it? Right? So, what about the current state do I think needs a change? Do I not like, or do I think can be better? Right? This is important because this informs your design goal. And to anyone who's been here in other sessions, this is something I keep harping on. Design goal. Very, 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 very important. If you're designing something, you need to have a design goal. It's okay to adjust your goal once the design is underway, right? It's okay to review your process, review your goal, and so on and so forth. But when you're starting out, you need a design goal, because that informs your design. If you're just designing away, you're gonna produce something, probably. but no one will know, including you, no one will know what that something actually is or what it does, right? Um, so when you're designing something, have a design goal in the beginning. That is part of the beginning phase, the ideation phase, the the initial planning and initial goal setting, right? Have a design goal. So why do I want to change it? That informs your design goal. That says, I want to change it because I don't like this specific part, or I don't like how that specific part functions, or how these two things fit together. And that means, okay, so your design goal is to change how these two things fit together, or how that particular part works, or if you can remove this specific thing, right? That is your design goal. But also, very importantly, because you're going in and doctoring around with a system that is already there, how is this integrated into the rest of the game? Is it a really, really central mechanic? Or is it something on the periphery, right, that I can just mess around with? Right? So this is knock-on effects. Right. So talking about D&D as an example, uh, changing something like initiative, how initiative works in combat, is relatively simple. And in fact, there are many videos and blog posts and etc. out there that give you suggestions for different initiative systems to use in D&D, because initiative in D&D is a single die roll. Yes, it determines who goes when in combat, but at the same time, it doesn't affect anything mechanically, right? It's not really affected by any complex systems. It just has a single modifier, right? But that's the modifier doesn't suffer if you remove initiative or change initiative from the game, right? And initiative itself doesn't actually feed back into any other mechanics. There are no mechanics that modify initiative, no systems, like there's no spell or really that says, oh, you gain plus on your initiative checks or whatever and so on. There is the waiting action, yes, but the waiting action itself, or the ready action, I forgot what exactly it's called, itself is really only there because initiative exists. Right? The readying action, if initiative were different, you wouldn't need the readying action, if that makes any sense. Right? It's kind of like a band-aid to fix any oversights in the current initiative system. So changing initiative doesn't really have a lot of knock-on effects on the game, right? So it's very easy to try different initiative systems in D&D. Um, but something like, I don't know, I want to change how hit points work. I don't like hit points. I want to change it to a wound system. Ooh, okay, when you do that, hit points is the core mechanic of D&D. Basically, every single thing in the game has to do with hit points of some sort. Either reducing someone else's hit points, or restoring your own hit points, or giving you different ways of reducing or restoring hit points, or increasing the amount of hit points you reduce, and so on and so forth, right? And resting deals with hit points, and a lot of magic items deal with hit points, a lot of character abilities deal with hit points, leveling up deals with hit points, right? So you would have to change or adapt or think about, at the very least, a lot of other things if you say, I want to change hit points. right? If you say, I want a wound system, then you go, okay, so what do weapons do? What do all of these damaging spells do? What does level up do? What does resting do? What does healing magic do? What do potions do? Right? What do monsters do? Right? How do you now account for monsters and their hit points? And so on and so forth. So there are a lot of knock-on effects, and you need to identify that. Otherwise, you might end up accidentally breaking something that you didn't realize was going to break. And then you fall into the patching rabbit hole, right? Of making one small change, not realizing what it does, and then realizing, oh, it broke something else. And then you patch that. And then that has another change somewhere else down the line. And then you patch that, and so on and so forth. And then might as well have designed your own game at that point, right? Just sit down for 2 hours, design your own game, done. Instead of spending 20 hours and several weeks of playing sessions patching a game because of one little change you made. So this is very important. How is this integrated into the rest of the game? Right? These are two questions you need to ask. Okay. I need to add a new layer. Give me a quick copy my palette. Okay. Work. It's a bit much. Okay. So now the big $5 question. What do I not like? What do I dislike about, and I'll just call it the cipher system to differentiate it from Numenera, the setting. Cipher system. As it applies to Numenera. Remember, I don't think the cipher system in and of itself is a bad system. I just don't think it applies to Numenera. So, there are actually two lines of things that I don't like about Numenera. Or the cipher system. Oops. What happened here? The two lines, and that is things it has that I want to change or remove. And the other thing is things it's missing. That I wish to add somehow. Okay, this requires a little bit more explanation. I know this is very rambly. That's me. I've apologized a lot of times for it. I think I have to apologize again. It's very rambly, but I want to paint the big picture, the whole thing, so that you understand what I'm talking about, you understand my thought process, and you can hopefully do this on your own at some point. That's the whole point of this thing, right? That you learn how to do this. So Numenera, when you read the book, and I put this into my Tumblr post as well. Let me just pull this up real quick. How did I phrase this? Where is my... Okay, so yeah. Okay, what is the game about? Right. So when you are designing a game, and this is also people who have seen some of my other game design streams will have seen this, but no worries, I'm going to recap it here. When you start off designing a game, right? You ask yourself a couple of questions to help you formulate a design goal and see how you can get to that goal. And one of the big questions is, of course, what is the game about? That should be pretty obvious, right? If you are designing a game, usually the game is about something. And I'm not meaning only in the narrative sense. It can, of course, be about something in a narrative sense, exploring like exploring a theme, for example. Um, like I want to make a game that explores loneliness. Okay, sure, you can have the game be about that, but you can also have I want to make a game that is all about tactical skirmishes and tactical decisions, right? And choosing the lesser evil and so on. Okay, then you get chess effectively, right? A game can also be about that. So it's not just what kind of stories does this game want to tell, but really think broader, right? What is the game about? What kind of an experience do you want to craft at the table? What is the game about? Right. Um, so the very, very thankfully, the Numenera core book tells us multiple times what the game is about, right? And part of what the game is about is also what do the characters do in the game, right? When talking about role playing games specifically, what do the characters actually do, right? In this game, because that's part of a large part of what the game is about. So the text itself tells us again and again the ninth world is about discovering the wonders of the worlds that came before it. Discovery is the soul of Numenera. And on page 123 of the core book, the core of gameplay in Numenera, the answer to the question, what do the characters do in this game? Like, holy heck, they spell it out explicitly. I love this, right? The designers explicitly tell you what their design goal was. Right? The answer to the question, what do the characters do in this game, is discover new things or old things that are new again. Okay. Okay, that is relatively specific. That is extremely explicit. We can work with that, right? So it's all about discovery, right? You have all of this weird stuff, this weird magical technology lying around in this world. You just have to go out and find it and discover it. And that's exactly what the game is about. Okay, perfect. Now, another big, big, big question you ask when you start off designing a game is how is the game about that? Right? So you can say, I want to make a game about loneliness, a game that explores the theme of loneliness. And then you build a game that turns out to be Monopoly. It's like, okay, but how is that about exploring loneliness? How is the game about the thing you said it's actually about? What in the game is going to help me experience this theme or this genre or this kind of decision making or this experience that you said you want me to experience? Right? And Numenera isn't. It says, the designers explicitly say, the game is about discovery, right? Exploring the what's left behind from the old worlds and discovering all of that stuff that's just lying there. And it's not actually about that. And that's mm, that's okay. Like, I would prefer a game that has systems in it that help emphasize what it's actually about. I would like a game to have its mechanics centered around its main theme somehow, right? But on the other hand, there's also a whole bunch of games that are more, and this is probably where the term rules light would actually be applicable, right? That are just saying, okay, here, this is a very simple um, way to a resolution mechanic, a very simple resolution mechanic, a way to judge whether or not some task will succeed or fail, and then you take it and go have at it. Just go out and play your game, right? And yeah, it can work, right? And there are plenty of games out there like this. Um, how did I how did I phrase this? Uh, yeah. So yeah, as a toolbox approach, that's how I phrased it. I don't know if that's actually a term. I'm making it a term now. So basically, instead of having a framework that helps guide the play and help the GM and the players into the experience that the game says it's about, it just gives the players and the GM a toolbox and says, here are a whole bunch of tools. Now go build your experience. And okay, that can work. There are plenty of games that work like this. Um, and that is not a flaw in and of itself necessarily. I'm being very careful with this phrasing. Um, it's just that the setting of Numenera is so weird. I would have liked some sort of guidance, but also if Numenera were only a game with this powerful core resolution mechanic that we described earlier, right, the reducing difficulty and such, and um, that creates some interesting dynamics in the system itself, and also has the whole, oh, I can look at my character sheet for what helps me, but I also look at my environment for what helps me. And that's an elegant blend. Um, that would be solid. But Numenera is more than that, and I think that more is too much. Let me explain. So, what does it have in addition to this powerful core resolution mechanic, to the GM intrusions, to the wonderfully evocative character descriptions? What it has is um, two big things that uh, are symptomatic of the same thing, but handled differently. Okay, that's very abstract, high level, like ivory tower game design thing. I will just get to the point. It has a combat system. It has a combat system in a game that explicitly tells you Numenera is not necessarily about combat. But worse than that, not just a combat system. Worse than that, it's a combat system that's rigid and not detailed enough. So think of the D&D combat system. The D&D combat system is pretty rigid. Once you enter combat in D&D, you essentially start playing a board game, right? Everyone has their turn, where that's strictly codified. Everyone has certain things, specific things they can do in a turn. you can move exactly this and that far. You have spells and attacks that reach exactly this and that far, or can affect exactly this and that many monsters. And you have very clear modifiers of die rolls and very clear consequences of the results of those die rolls, right? It's very rigidly defined. However, because D&D puts such a heavy focus on combat, there are a lot of different moves that the system gives you, a lot of different mechanical effects that you can conjure using the combat system. Many character abilities and items and such have an effect in combat, so you can pick from them, right? So players are given many, like enough details and abilities to make meaningful choices and have enough choices to keep combat interesting. Numenera doesn't have that. It has the rigid structure, but it doesn't have all the choices. So combat just ends up being I attack, I attack, I attack, I attack, I attack, I attack, and that's it. It's boring, it's repetitive, but you cannot escape the rigid structure that the game gives you. Right? That's what I mean by that. Again, ads are going to start soon. I won't put in the second point here right now. Instead, I'm going to finish my food that has still been sitting here all this time. So,
Endure.
yeah.
In enduring, grow strong.
What am I eating? It's chocolate Baumkuchen. Baumkuchen. What is it called here? Nienlun. Der Baumkuchen is a special type of German cake. It's essentially a layered cake, right, with a lot of thin layers that are stuck together. But how it's made is you have a stick, right? You have a stick maybe like the width of two fingers or so, and that stick is constantly rotating. And then what you do is you have the cake batter, and you paint the cake batter onto the stick. And then once the first layer is kind of solid enough, you paint a second layer on it. And then you paint a third layer on it. And so forth, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth, until you get something like 10 or 20 layers of this cake batter all on the stick. So it's a round cake that, if you cut it open, kind of looks like a tree trunk with all of the rings. Right? That's why it's called Baumkuchen, tree cake. And it's, I don't know, I just like it. It's a really fascinating cake. All right, where was I? Oh yeah, not enough options for actions. Right? Not enough options for actions. So in D&D, to draw on that as an example again, also really enjoying the talk. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I hope you can take some of that with you, something with you. So yeah, like I was talking about, Numenera has the same basic rigid structure. It even has initiative rolls to determine who goes first and who goes later. It uses slightly simplified things for everything, of course, right? Numenera is rules light. It simplifies things. Only players roll, for instance, if a player attacks or player character attacks, The player rolls for the attack. If a player character is attacked by a monster, the player rolls to dodge or to defend. Okay, fine. But the basic of underlying fundamental mechanical rigidness stays. You have initiative. You have very clear turns. Everyone can do exactly this much in a turn. Um, and and you have to go through it, and you have to. Everyone has a certain number of HP that you have to roll to zero, right? You have to keep rolling dice until someone's HP drops to zero, basically. And that's the combat system. So it's still as rigid as the D&D combat system, but it doesn't give the characters or the players enough options for different things to do um, to make it truly interesting, right? It's like in D&D, when you enter combat, you enter this locked room, but the locked room has a lot of different toys that you can all try out to open the door or whatever, right? And in Numenera, when you enter combat, it sends you into a similar locked room, but there's only a single toy in there. And at some point, that toy becomes boring. That's been my experience when playing Numenera, and I've with different groups. I've played Numenera with like 3 or 4 different groups that I can remember right now, and it's always turned out like this, right? So it's rigid, but not detailed enough. Same, by the way, for abilities and ciphers, which, like I said, function like single-use character abilities, right? So they're essentially the same when you think about them and when you use them. Same basic idea. They are also they're not necessarily rigid because they're not a framework, but they are too mechanically detailed. So what do I mean by that? Um, as an example, Numenera with its whole rules light approach to things is like, yeah, we don't use exact measurements for distance here. We use things like immediate distance, right? So anything but that you can reach in like 1 or 2 steps. Then there's close distance, right? Anything where you could dash up to and maybe touch it. And then there's long distance, something that you can definitely see, and maybe you can throw a rock at it or so, but you can't really interact with it without spending some time walking up. And then there's very long, it's like things you can kind of see in the distance, but you can't do anything with them right now. Right, so it uses relatively vague things like distance measurement. It also uses very broad categories for things like weapons, right? Oh, you only have 3 types of weapons. You have light weapons and medium weapons and heavy weapons, right? Same with armor. You have light and medium and heavy armor, right? The exact type of armor you're wearing doesn't, or the exact kind of armor you're wearing doesn't matter. Only matters is it light, heavier, light, medium, or heavy, right? Um, and and it does a lot of that throughout the system, which again, fine. I don't have any problem with rules light. In fact, I kind of, well, no, I don't. I don't want to say I kind of enjoy rules light. That's wrong. I enjoy low crunch, which is a different thing. But um, I I don't see a problem with it per se. There are plenty of rules light systems which function really really well, and Numenera trying to be a more rules light system, awesome, right? It makes it more accessible to players to learn, makes it more easy for the GM to run, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, there are a lot of strange details in the character abilities and in the ciphers, which are the same thing. So a cipher might say, "Oh yeah, this cipher generates a wall of freezing cold, right? Like absolute zero. It produces like it fills a wall-shaped area of absolute zero temperature, so that anyone passing through will get damaged by just how cold it is. It's like, okay, that's cool. And then the cipher says like, yeah, it fills a space of exactly 30 feet by 30 feet by 1 foot. It's like, I thought we're not using exact measurements. What happened? All right. Or it's like, oh yeah, if you're using this specific ability, it means you can run exactly this kind of distance and then still use an action or things like that, right? It is or things like, oh yeah, if you maybe there's examples I can find in the books themselves. I have them right here. Um do 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 do. Yeah, so it's like, oh, if my character fuses flesh and steel, right? It's like, oh yeah, I have a special healing. Traditional healing skills, medicines, and techniques work only half as well for you. Each time you start at full health, the first 5 points of damage you take can never be healed in these ways or recovered normally. Instead, you must use repairing skills, and I've stopped reading because this is a lot of detail, right? For a game that is supposedly rules light, um, or it's like, huh? And there's a lot of this in the book where it's all like, oh yeah, you can do exactly these things in these exact parameters, and nothing outside of that. And so they are too mechanically detailed in that regard. So Numenera, in this sense, is okay. I will bring that later. So why I do not like that? That is because one thing it does is it mechanizes the mystery out of the game. Right? Numenera is all about having technology that is so advanced, it's like magic to us, right? Because we have no hopes of understanding it. It is mysterious, it is weird, and we can only hope to kind of sort of use it, maybe, but never to understand or even replicate it. And then you go ahead and have ciphers, this completely not understandable technology, and give it extremely exact parameters, extremely exact values, extremely exact rules. And that is just describing the mystery, explaining the mystery, showing the wizard behind the curtain, right? And that is not just it doesn't fit, it actively undoes what I feel the game is about and what the designers say the game is about, right? The discovery, right? The discovery of the weird technology and all that. Like there are pages upon pages upon pages. When you read the setting description, a lot of things are left unexplained, intentionally left unexplained. When you read, there are many, many books about the setting, right? So many things are intentionally left vague and unexplained and just up to guesswork and up to interpretation for the reader or the players, right, and the GM. Um, I was wondering where the music went. Um, that because it's there to preserve the mystery, it's there to preserve the magic. But then, as soon as you get to ciphers and other types of Numenera, right, you suddenly have these really, really exact mechanical instructions, and that just ruins the magic. And what both of these things do, or more so the second one, right? What the second one does is rules light, and high crunch. So rules light or rules heavy, crunch, no crunch, blah, all that are terms thrown around the RPG design community more than the RPG playing community nowadays. Um, and they are not really useful because nobody knows what exactly they mean. And that's because the term rules light, rules heavy tend to talk about two completely different things. Rules, and there is a good article online, a blog post online, and I fully agree with what it's saying. It's trying to differentiate and make those terms kind of useful again, right? So it differentiates between rules light, rules heavy, and low crunch, high crunch. What do these mean? So rules are the systems, right? A rules light game is a game with very few systems. So a game with only a single core resolution mechanic, for instance, would be rules light. Right? A game with many different systems, like a complex combat system or a dungeon exploration system, inventory management system, whatever other systems, would be more rules heavy, right? Because you have different frameworks of rules that you require to run the game. Crunch, on the other hand, is the amount of detail, and not like narrative detail. Again, we're talking about the game system here, the game rules, but mechanical detail that you have to look up or keep in mind or pay attention to, right? So a low crunch game would be something like, oh yeah, there are two types of weapons, melee ranged. What they do is up to you, just kind of, you know, you're a human being. You have some sort of common sense, maybe. Just kind of, it doesn't matter, right? The game is not detailed enough for it to matter. Whereas a really, really big 3-page weapon list, every weapon has like 15 stats. It has like damage and piercing value and injury value and speed value and reach value and weight and damage type and blah and blah and bloop and blah, right? Such a game would be high crunch because every time you use a weapon or change your weapon, you have to keep all of these details in mind and have to pay attention to all of them, right? And sometimes have to look them up all the time, right? And that would be high crunch. The Cipher system is rules light. It basically only has the core resolution mechanic. It's a bit more involved than just roll die be done, right? But it's still just the core resolution mechanic and kind of sort of the combat system, but right. A lot of games have that nowadays. It doesn't have any other system. That's the other part. Things that's missing, right? I'm not there yet. I'm gonna get to that. So it's rules light. It is, but it is relatively high crunch because every time you use a cipher, every time you use a character ability, every time, not when you pick up an item, but when you pick up, say, any sort of Numenera or so, right? You have to look up what it does. You have to look at the exact stats, the exact mechanical values, the exact way it affects the game. And that is high crunch. And I do not like high crunch. Personal opinion. I'm well aware it's a personal opinion, and I'm not treating it as anything else but a personal opinion. And I'm not saying people who enjoy high crunch are playing wrong or doing RPGs wrong or they don't know how to have fun. No. Everyone finds different things about games enjoyable. That's the point. Why we have like 10,000 different RPGs out there on the floating around the internet, right? Um, and that's amazing, right? Different people like different things. So yeah, have different games so that they can also have fun playing games. That's awesome. I personally do not like high crunch. I despise it. A lot of crunch for me is unnecessary accounting, bookkeeping, physics engineering. If that's even a word. Trying to turn the game into a physics engine. And I don't need that. I don't have the mind for that. I don't want that at my game. I don't mind rules heavy games. I like systems. I like the frameworks. I like seeing what people do to encapsulate different broad situations in a game, right? Crawling through a dungeon, traveling through the wilderness, chases, combat, tense social negotiations, managing your inventory, maybe things like uh, wounds and fatigue and hunger and thirst and all of that. Right? All there are so many different systems out there, relationships, etc., contacts, and so on. You can have a lot of awesome systems. And I enjoy those as long as the system is well made and fits the game itself and what it's about. Um, so I don't mind rules heavy, but I do mind high crunch. And that leads into things that's missing for me. So things it's missing, the game claims it's about discovery, but it has zero systems about discovery. Zero systems aiding in the process of exploration and discovery. And I think we can do better. I think we can, if the game includes a combat system and saying, oh, the game doesn't have to be about combat. That literally says that in the rulebook. And then the game turns around and says, oh, the game is about discovery, but then doesn't give you a system for discovery. That, to me, looks like messed up priorities. Right? It's like you had your design goal and then you decided to design something else entirely. So, I'm not saying get rid of the combat system, though I will probably get rid of the combat system. What I'm saying is, no, we need more systems. More systems, especially those aiding exploration and discovery. I can write that better. Right. Okay. That's what I'm looking for. Right? So that's what I dislike about the cipher system as it applies to Numenera. So that was a pretty deep dive into various parts of the game. Um, and why I don't like them, right? So why I don't like them here, it's too rigid and not detailed enough, and here it's too mechanically detailed and leads to high crunch. Now I need to look at, okay, does this, if I want to remove or change or adapt or expand or whatever these systems, these pieces of the game, will that impact anything else? Well, let's have a look. The combat system, right? If I change it, will that impact anything else? The answer is no. The combat system is self-contained. Kinda. Is mostly self-contained as a mechanical system. Right? There is not much in the combat system that mechanically affects other part of the game significantly enough to say, oh, if I remove the combat system or if I change the combat system, that's going to break entire different parts of the game. That's not going to happen. What is going to happen is it will affect the player choices. Because, and this is another thing that I do not understand, it might just be Monty Cook being in a D20 mode of some sort, right? And that is you have entire Let me see how I can phrase this. There are entire entire, not entire player choices, player options. Let's call it options, not choices. Options devoted to combat. There are many foci, right? The whole rides the lightning, shreds the walls of the world, right? Those kind of things that are devoted to combat. There's something like Master's Defense, Master's Weaponry, Fights with Panache, Rages, Defends, and so on and so forth, right? An entire character focus on nothing but combat, giving you options for combat. And then there is an entire character class. One entire character class. And the core rulebook has 3 character classes. So 1/3 of all the character classes are the fighter class. Nothing else. I checked. All the ability, or like 95% of the abilities the glaive, that's what the game calls it, the glaive can choose from, are related to combat and nothing else. So if I want to change or remove combat in some way, I need to keep in mind that these character options are now obsolete, have to be adapted as well, either entirely removed. That's the simplest thing, right? Just say, yeah, no, glaives aren't part of the game because combat isn't a part of the game. Mechanically, at least, as its own system. Um, or changed somehow, right? But I need to keep that in mind. But again, that is not a systemic thing. That is just player options. And remember, I said before, player options are relatively easy to deal with. It's the systemic parts that are difficult. So, combat system mechanically in itself is mostly self-contained, right? Thankfully, the whole taking damage and rest and recovery system and so on is already handled by the core resolution mechanic. Remember, when you are spending effort to make a check easier for you, that is effectively paying hit points. So the whole taking damage, in quotes, and recovering those points is already handled by the game. So removing the combat system is not going to break that. Right? So it is self-contained. And then player options. Now, abilities and ciphers. What about these? Essentially the same thing. Abilities and ciphers are player options. They are just player options. And player options are easy to deal with. You toss them out, you change them, you just don't give them as much detail, right? Whatever. Super easy to deal with. No systemic change necessary. Right? So that makes this super easy. That makes it really easy to modify this. Right? I can just say, screw the combat system. I'm tossing it out. Done. Right? Or I change it to make it less crunch, less rigid. Um, and maybe more narratively interesting and so on. And then all I have to do is look at what player options I want to keep, which ones are interesting enough to change the way ciphers are written up, right? Remove all of these exact numbers and values and bring the magic back in, right? And that's it. That's super easy. And then the systems. And that's also easy. Not, well, it's simple. It's not necessarily easy. Designing systems is not necessarily easy, right? Because you're effectively designing mini games within a larger game that ideally fits into the larger game somehow and still has the same kind of themes. It's simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's doable. It's very, very doable. And again, we don't have to worry too much about things. Hey, yo, Goose School, honk. How goes ya? I'm doing good. I am discovering a lot about my favorite game. Well, one of my, not my favorite game. It's probably not my favorite game, but one of my well-loved games. Um, RPGs, and making good progress here. Killing my voice and talking about how to homebrew it. How are you doing? It's nice to have you here. Also, ads are going to start in a couple seconds, so you have amazing timing. But yeah, so these are also uh they shouldn't be entirely self-contained. These systems shouldn't be, but integrating something, integrating new systems is oh my god, easier than removing them, right? And there are many good systems to look for. How lovely. Got lost on good old homebrew? Exactly. For Numenera. I'm not sure if you've heard of this game before. Maybe not many people have, but I really enjoy it. But some parts of it I don't. So I'm hoping to change those.
Endure. In enduring, grow
There's the
strong.
ad. Oh my goodness, I've been going for 2 hours. Wow. 2 hours of laying theoretical groundwork. Dang. Mm, okay. Ooh. But yeah, I never thought I get those ground rules done. Yeah. And that is enjoying it. Oh yeah, no, I am enjoying this. I I mean in my real life, I am a teacher. And I picked that job out of passion. Right. So teaching things like this, explaining things like this, and on a topic that I am also very interested in, very passionate about, is I'm enjoying this. I hope you are enjoying listening. Right. That's the important thing. I could talk about this for days, but the important thing is that people enjoy listening. Hella neat. uh, okay, so um, there are. I mean, coming back to this, there's of course the choice of how. Can I not pick a? Oh, I can pick a value. How's 80%? This good. This is not bad. Can I? I can actually have the whole thing on here without having to tab around. Okay, that's good. So these core systems, I can think about how much I want to change them. Right. But for now, I'm going to keep them as they are. All right. And when you homebrew something, you can of course go as far as you want, and at some point you have a completely new game at your hands, and that's also cool, right? But for now, as a first step, I'm going to keep these things as they are and only adapt the systems, because I think even if I want to change the core resolution mechanics somehow, um, I can still do that after everything else, after I have established systems and changed character options and such, because the core resolution mechanic is the engine, and everything else, all the other systems are basically all the peripheral things that run off the energy that the engine brings, right? So if you're in a car, for instance, the engine, the core resolution mechanic is the engine, and then all these other systems are stuff like the lights, the wipers, the aircon, the parking assistant, the wheels, uh, what do I know, navigation, etc. Right? So those don't depend on the exact engine that's in there. They can be adapted. The important thing that you have an engine that drives everything, and that you have other systems that kind of help you do the thing that the game is about. So this is, like I said, this is simple. Get rid of the combat system, or maybe find a better combat system that kind of fits. Right? Well, I can think about that, but it's not a priority. And then adapt player options. So let me put that in yet another color. So find, or not find, create new combat system, question mark, right? Again, not a priority, but definitely a possibility. And then remove / adapt. I'm gonna write //. Oh my god, adapt player options. Right? Maybe the glaive, right, the explicit combat class, is not just about combat. Maybe it's about, physical action, right? Including things like athletics and strength and endurance, right? And of course, combat is a physical action and would fall under that, but it's not the only thing the class is about. And that's one way of adapting it, one way of going about it. I haven't decided anything yet. And then other systems. So what systems do I want? Right. So let me draw a line here. What systems do I want? Let me put that in this color. What systems do I want? And now we're basically back to what I was doing the previous few weeks, where I was designing various different, or analyzing and designing various different systems for an old school fantasy game. So, what kind of systems help with discovery and exploration and such, right? What systems are good for that and help sell this experience? And we can look to many different games for that. So one system I think is some sort of travel system. Travel plus exploration, overland exploration system, right? So the players are in some sort of town, and they hear a rumor that, oh yeah, there's this strange thing 3 days out to the east, right? This strange tower that just kind of flickers in and out of reality. Um, and so on. And it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe there's some stuff in there to learn, to understand, to grab, and so on. And then you travel there. And then when you're there, you look for it or you explore it and so on. So some sort of system for travel exploration could be cool because then it turns it more into a game of the players choose what they want to go after and how they want to go about going there, and it makes use of the strange technology around them. If they hear rumors of, oh yeah, this place has this strange vehicle that you can have, right? It moves on its own and it can carry several people and so on, and they're like, oh, okay, that thing is like a week out in the wilderness. But if we find it and learn how to use it, that will make our future exploration a lot easier. And then they can choose to go there and actively look for this all-terrain vehicle or whatever it might be, right? Um, as opposed to going somewhere else and exploring that thing. And having travel rules and having easier travel only matters if travel was difficult to begin with, right? I mean, sure, like narratively, it's probably nice, like, oh yeah, we have a cool car, yay. Um, but the impact is much bigger if the players have seen, oh yeah, if we travel for a whole week, that's really taking a toll on our resources and on our endurance and so on and so forth. We want that car, right? Um, and that may make other ways of travel, like the maybe the PCs have a cipher that allows them to teleport somewhere. And it's like, do we use it now or do we use it to travel back to town? Or so, because we know how difficult the travel back will be, and so on and so forth. So that makes choices more meaningful. That's what I'm trying to say. So some sort of travel and exploration system. Um, Another system I feel like will help, and this is just stealing wholesale from old school D&D and what was in there, because a lot of Numenera fits onto old school D&D, surprisingly. That is some sort of item management, item slash resource management. If players are able to carry along anything they want, as is the case right now in the core rules of Numenera, any challenge just becomes looking through your bag and then finding the right tool. Right? If you say, yeah, I carry 30 workshops worth of tools here in this nice little bag with me, any challenge becomes trivial. Because somewhere in that bag you will have something, and well, you can carry all of it, right? It's not a problem. So some sort of item and resource management, and that again gives players more meaningful choices of things like, what do we carry? Do we carry the second core rulebook, by the way, has things like exotic materials that you can use to enhance things that you're building, right? Make structures more solid, or make them heated, or whatever, unbreakable, or repair them really well, or a lot of different things, right? Uh, and it's like, okay, do I want to carry that back, or do I want to carry a valuable treasure I found, or do I want to carry my tools, or what do I want, right? It doesn't have to be extremely stringent. It doesn't have to be mean or punishing too much. but some sort of item and resource management system would be nice. In a way, the core resolution mechanic already has a resource management system, right? You have your 3 stats, might, speed, and intellect, that are actually pools of points. And as you use effort to make tasks more or less difficult, you are spending those points. So that is already some sort of resource management right there. Why not expand that? And the game already says, yeah, you can only carry 2 ciphers or 3 ciphers, right? Any more, and you start getting detrimental effects. Why not expand on that? Right? Why not build a bigger system that includes other things that people use for travel and exploration and so on? Right? Do I carry maybe 2 tool bags with me in case the tools of one bag start breaking? That could be a thing. Right? But then that's a choice. If I bring 2 tool bags, I bring a second tool bag, I don't get to bring, I don't know, light sources or something because I just don't have the space. And things like that. Um Hold on, let me skip this song. It's not quite what I'm looking for. Um and so these two are big. You can have more systems. You could have what essentially amounts to a dungeon crawling system, but not quite because there are no real dungeons in this game, and they shouldn't function like an old school D&D dungeon. Right? Again, the focus is not on braving a hostile, dangerous environment and escaping with as much treasure as you can. The focus is on exploring a strange and mysterious environment and trying to find magnificent wonders. Right? So an old school dungeon crawling system won't work, but something like a ruin exploration system. I'm just changing the name slightly to make sure I understand what the difference is. Um, right? Maybe something like that. Um, let's see. Is there anything else that I can think of? There are some other systems that are um kinda sorta present in the second core book, but slight change will always have a big impact, so actions are justified. I mean, yeah, true. And it's to differentiate between the two, mainly. Um, the 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 second core book. So there are 2 core books. If you're trying to buy Numenera now, there's Numenera Discovery, which is the basic core book that has all the core rules, the core player options, the introduction to the setting, etc. And then there's Numenera Destiny, which is more about some other systems or other things that the game is also about, mainly community building and community advancement, right? Remember, yes, the game is about discovering all of the marvels of the old civilizations, but the second step is then using these marvels to improve the lives of your community. And that's what the second book is about. And it kinda sorta has systems, not, they don't feel complete. And again, they are very rules light, high crunch. So you have things like crafting systems and community building systems and so on, but it's really just, oh yeah, here's a crafting system that amounts to, I have a list of 200 different exotic materials and ingredients. And that's it. Or here's a community building system that amounts to I have a list of 500 different structures and tools that you can build. And that's it. So again, there is no system, no mechanical framework, and just a whole bunch of things to look up. Right? Like no rules and only crunch, basically. And I want to revert that. So some sort of crafting system. I mean, okay, I'm being a bit disingenuous. There are some rules. Some rules of things like, oh yeah, you can break apart ciphers. You can make rolls to see what you find in a ruin and so on. Sure, there are some systems, okay, but the focus is still on the crunch, not on the systems. Crafting and repairing and deconstructing, etc., and all the good stuff that happens with that, and community building and essentially community running and so on, right? And I find that to be fascinating. Not a lot of games have that component where you build your own community, you build your own little village, right? And not as a lord or king or leader or some other sort of like top down noble figure, like in many older D&D games where at a certain level the player characters would receive a stronghold and they get followers and they can rule their domain and so on. Not from that position, but from the position of one of the members of the community, right? And then as you can make decisions as a player, either on a meta level, just saying it would be cool if the community went in this direction, or you role play it out and you have systems for that, saying like, oh yeah, my character focuses on keeping a library, for example. And then you can say, okay, so that means your community has a library that starts growing and then it develops into this kind of direction, as opposed to if you had some other building, like, I don't know, a brewery or something, right? Um, or a barracks, etc. So a more bottom or top down. What's the opposite of top down? Bottom up, right? A more bottom up approach to community building. That is very fascinating. And sure, your characters could become like the mayor or some other kind of leader of the community, or they could be advisors, or they could be, just active participants, or the people who go out and do stuff. Um, but still, that is a fascinating concept, and I think one that deserves a lot more exploration into it, and a robust system so that the players can make powerful choices to shape their own community and have a real connection to the game world in this way, because the world is so alien, quite literally sometimes, and so strange, and humans know they call themselves as the ninth world, so they know that there were several huge civilizations in the past. They can see the evidence of these civilizations all around them. uh it's like you feel dwarfed by such technological accomplishments, and having something more human, something very relatable, something very like kind of touching grass, kind of, um, if that's the correct usage, a kind of connection to the game, right? I think can be very, very powerful. So this is definitely something community building. And part of community building is crafting and repairing, right? Building structures, building uh, devices, and so on. And then maybe some sort of right? Relationship and contacts, again, as part of community building. And also, as part of all of this, some sort of social systems, negotiations, maybe, or elections, or I don't know, right? Whatever you might want to see in your game. Um, there's a lot of, and there's many more, right? Because the world is so strange, you can have more very weird things out there that you could implement. Um, yeah. So let me think. So I think because the resolution system is already quite powerful and has very implicit resource management and attrition built into it, these systems can be lighter on the rules side. Right? If you were building systems for D&D, for example, D&D's core resolution mechanic is just roll and then see yay or nay, basically, right? So the system has to do a lot of heavy lifting. The other systems, like the combat system, for example, or if you want to introduce other systems, dungeon crawling, wilderness exploration, whatever, what have you, those need to do a lot of heavy lifting. But because the core resolution mechanic of Numenera already does quite a bit of lifting, these systems can afford to be slightly lighter. Right? You already have kind of a built-in cost system, a built-in resource drain system. You have a built-in um, engaging the players to make them think about what their characters can do and what's in the environment. Right? That's all already part of the core game itself. So you don't necessarily need all of that in the systems again in these extra structures. Um, so let me just make a note for that. The core resolution mechanic already can no longer spell. Already includes uh, attrition or resource drain, right? And also the ciphers, for example, right? Or abilities. Using abilities also tends to cost those points, right? Using an ability from your character to leap very large distances or something might cost might points. Or using a cipher means you no longer have that cipher, quite literally, right? So that's also a resource drain built into the system. And they have uh, a, a a cost that's tied to that. What did I say here? Cost, right? That's tied in, and um, using both character traits and environment to aid in tasks. That reminds me of another thing I want to include, but not as a system in itself, I guess. But something else I want to include is meaningful character traits. That's something I haven't talked about at all, but it's something I'm a sucker for personally. And basically, um, again, so when you think about D&D, and I keep coming back to D&D because that's the example most people probably know. You have your race, don't use that term. You have class, and you have a background. And the background gives you a bunch of uh character traits, personality traits, ideals, etc., right? Um to kind of aid you in role playing, I guess. Right? And they kind of sort of have a very marginal peripheral mechanical impact that often gets forgotten and no like um but basically you have these traits that don't really tie into the game system at all, right? They're just kind of there. You might as well not use them because there's so many other things to focus on that are much more core. And there is also, ad is starting soon, I'm kind of panicking. There's also the opposite where such traits have a mechanical impact on the game. There are some games that do that, but again, I'll let the ads play before starting into examples, etc. So, uh, my timing is so amazing. I keep bringing up a new point every time the ads start. Oh my goodness. So, but there are different ways to do that. Implementing character traits, like personality traits and beliefs and ideals and goals and drive.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Mm. Oh, I just realized I've talked for 2.5 hours and done no design. I've just been analyzing the game. I mean, that's also part of it. You want to understand the game before you go in with a scalpel or a hammer or whatever it is you're using. Um, but yeah, definitely. Um, though to be fair, for the longest time, like the game came out in 2013, and I bought it not long after. And from very early on, I said the setting is freakishly amazing, but something about the system feels off. Took me a long time to put my thoughts in order to see what exactly I don't like about the system. All right, welcome back, everyone. Um, right. So the character traits. So yeah, like in D&D, you have traits that are just kind of there, right? It's like alignment. Alignment doesn't do anything in the game, quite literally. Um, it's just kind of there, and it could inform your role playing. Many times it doesn't because no one actually understands what the alignments mean, right? Um, and that's it. They don't. They're kind of like role playing prompts that you might just as well ignore or can safely ignore because they don't have any mechanical impact. They don't change the way you interact with the rules and the mechanics of the game. And then there are games which do have that, which do have this integration. One of them is a game I like as well, very, very much, and that is called Fate. And in Fate Core is the as the name implies, the core rules of that is when you um, you have certain aspects as part of your character, and these aspects can be personality traits. They can also be beliefs, drives. They can be flaws. They can be connections. They can be worldviews. They can be significant background events, right? Anything like that. And um, when this trait would influence the narrative or influence your character actions positively or negatively, you can decide to do so. There's mechanical integration for it with fate points. And then, because you have decided that your character has this kind of personality, or this kind of ideal, or this kind of flaw, or this kind of connection, or whatever, that has, through the mechanics, impacted the way the story goes. Right? So if your character has, I don't know, cannot resist the shinies or so, and then you see you're delving in a tomb, and then you see this golden idol sitting on a pedestal, and everything in you screams that thing is trapped, and all the other characters are screaming at you saying that thing is trapped, and the GM slides over a fate point and says your character cannot resist the shinies. Then you go, you know what, you are right. You take the fate point, which is something you can mechanically use in the game, and then your character grabs the idol, right? Or you pay back a fate point to the GM and says, you know what? Everyone is screaming at me saying that thing is trapped. This one time, my character is going to resist. Okay, but that then costs you a fate point, something mechanical, right? Or you can have something like, or you can also use that positively, cannot resist the shinies, right? You're like, um, I don't know. It's like, oh, we want to forge a letter from this important person that we met earlier, right? And try to gauge how this person talks and how this person might write a letter and try to get what they want. We need to forge a letter, and then you go, you know what? My character could not resist the shiny. I stole the signet ring because it was shiny, right? And then you spend a fate point and say, yeah, my character most likely did that. And now that will help us in forging the letter. Right? And and again, because you chose a character with those traits, you created the character with those specific traits, you can use them to have mechanical impact that then impacts the narrative. Right? You can activate them mechanically, and they also feed into other systems, right? You can use them to feed into die rolls and such as well, right? So more mechanical impact even. Um, and that is having personality traits and such that actually have a mechanical impact in the system. And it doesn't need to go that far as in Fate, but right now in Numenera, there are also some of these mechanical things, but they don't really have any impact. They're kind of like D&D backgrounds, right? So you have things like when you pick your when you pick your type, your character class, you pick some sort of background thing, right? Some sort of connection to the world, right? When you pick your descriptor, right? Clever or strong or swift or whatever, you pick how you found out about the first adventure, how you joined the party. And if you pick your focus, right, rides the lightning, fights with two weapons at once or something, you pick a connection to a certain other PC to have a special type of relationship with him. And yeah, those things exist, but that's basically it. They are just role playing prompts that you could safely ignore. They don't do anything. They basically never come up again. Unless you intentionally pay attention to them. And I think there's more that can be done, especially with the descriptor. Right? If your character is clever, what does that mean about them? If your character instead is clumsy, what does that mean about them? If your character is rugged, what does that mean? Right? What does it say about how they deal with the world around them, how they deal with other people? How could that influence things? And that is something I might want to explore. It's gonna be a bit more difficult because it's more fundamental, right? It will hook more fundamentally into core systems than these other things that I have here on the side. But I think at some point that is something worth exploring because I absolutely love having character traits like this and having them impact the game more more mechanically, more readily, and just making help players make their characters more living and breathing, alive. Words are hard. Um, it's a role playing aid, right? Because you pay mechanical attention to these things. That means when you're playing the game, you are paying attention to your character, and it helps you with your role playing. And I know this because I have personally experienced this when I played Fate. Right, the aspects that I've written down for my character have immediately prompted role playing decisions just because it's like when the GM asks, "What do you do?" Right? And because their character aspects are front and center of your character and you think about them all the time and they play such an important role both narratively and mechanically, right? What do you do? And then you can look at your aspects and be like, "Oh, I will do this thing," right? And that is not just staying in character, that is also a role playing prompt to help you come up with something to do, right? Just a quick, very, very quick aside with what I mean by that. It's like we were once playing in a steampunk airship pirate game, and my character was like the only other fixed crew member. So we had the captain, and then we had me, and then we had a bunch of other people who just happened to be on the ship for a while, essentially, the other player characters. And my cabin boy slash lookout slash first mate slash everything else crew member character had an aspect called "a crew always sticks together." And at some point, we ran into like this undead corrupting influence that had taken possession of two other player characters, and they were in some ship, maybe even our ship, I forgot. Um, and they were being controlled, and one of them was doing these really weird jerky movements, drawing her sword or something, and walking toward me as I opened the door to see what was going on. Right, so the GM described the situation. One of them is they're both doing something weird, like they're being possessed by this otherworldly influence, and one of them turns to me, draws her sword or something, and then GM asks, "What do you do?" And I was thinking, run away, maybe? I guess it's scary, right? So as a player, my first instinct was, heck no, I don't want any part of this. But I looked at my character sheet and said, no, a crew always sticks together. I will try to help them. Right? And that informed my role playing, helped me come up with a course of action that incidentally is in character, right? So that's what I mean. If these things are put more front and center, it helps players become more comfortable playing their character. right? And that's what these systems are for. These systems are here to help GMs run the game and to help players play the game, because role playing games can be quite daunting, they can be quite complex, they can be very big, and sometimes you're not a trained improv actor or TV series writer or something. You don't have all of these ideas, right? So why not play a game that helps you in these moments, right? And that's what I'm looking for in all of these systems. And that's what I mean with meaningful character traits. Put them more front and center, maybe have them have some mechanical impact so that players will remember them, players will pay attention to them, and then they can help players with shaping the narrative and feeling good about themselves for staying in character and feeling good about themselves for coming up with something to do, right? Whenever the GM asks, what do you do? So that's what I'm looking for here. Okay. That was once again a lot of talk. Let's see what we can do here. So, um, we have here item resource management, ruin, exploration, um, crafting, repairing, community building, relationship and contacts. So these kind of systems down here fall more under the community aspect. So I could have a bigger framework that is community and then have smaller systems that hook into that. And then this over here, maybe including combat, kinda, is more the exploration side of things, right? So again, I can. What is happening with the music? Um, that some sort of bigger upper level exploration system that then branches out into smaller systems. And that is also a good thing. That is also a way to design systems, and that is you have something like onion layers in a way, right? You have, say, the core system, and then you have or the core mechanic, the core resolution thing, and then you have the high level systems or structures, right? And then on the outside of this, you have, oh my god, these are horrible circles. It's also bad, but you have like more lower level structures, and then you could go even further and have things like peripheral. Come on. Peripheral structures and so on and so forth. And Powered by the Apocalypse, for instance, if you've ever heard of that system, uses that kind of philosophy, right? This kind of onion layers. So you have, if you use all of the systems, if you use a peripheral system for something, you'll get the most experience out of it, gameplay experience out of it. If you forget how it works, if you can't think of how it works, if you don't understand how it works, you can disregard it and fall back onto the attached lower level structure. Chemistry look like look like chemistry symbols. I guess they do, in a way. Yes, it's supposed to be an onion-ish kind of structure. But if it helps thinking of them as electron levels, then go ahead. um, right, you can fall back onto the lower level structure, right? The more broad structure that's tied to it, you won't get the full experience from it, but it'll still work. If you don't remember that, or if you don't know how that works or how to apply it, you can fall back to the higher level structure. Again, you won't get the full experience from it, but it'll still work. The game won't crash. You can still play. If you forget the higher level structure somehow, you can always fall back to the core mechanic. And again, you won't get the full experience, gameplay experience, but the game won't stop. You can still continue playing and get something out of it. And that's the philosophy of Apocalypse World, and that is something you can use here as well. You can have a higher level layer. Ogres have layers. Yes, exactly. This is an ogre. This is the chemical composition of an ogre. There, we have solved ogres. Um so you can have a structure that is exploration. Right? And that, oh my god, this music is driving me nuts. Okay. Um right? So you can have a structure that's just exploration. And whenever you're doing any kind of exploration, you can use that structure. But there's also a structure for, say, traveling somewhere over land. Okay, if you want the extra detail, if you want the extra decisions, if you want the more involved gameplay, you can use that structure. Or item resource management, right? Maybe a more detailed version of that. Sure, then you can use that. Or ruin exploration, you can use that, etc., etc., etc. But you don't have to, right? So this kind of layer cake approach to systems or structure creation can also work. Um, which means we create two structures, a community structure and an exploration structure. And then we can fill in details after that. I just noticed I wrote all of this on the wrong layer. Oh, that is awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay, what do I do now? Merge with layer below. Remove this one and then oh god. A layer check while using this for writing. Oh my goodness. That's wild. Okay. Yes, this is what I wanted. Okay. Um okay. I don't know how deep I will go into this because designing a structure, a game structure, is a lot like designing a game. It is effectively designing a mini game. That's pretty big. But when you're designing a structure, you go through a lot of the same steps as designing a game on its own, right? So if I want the exploration structure, oh my goodness, exploration structure, right? I go through a lot of the same kind of questions. What is it about? How is it about that? What do the characters do? And so on and so forth and so on. Um, I establish the design goal, right? So things like what is it might be good to adapt the questions. What is this structure for? Right? So this structure is about uh leaving the safety of the community to uh find oops and explore the world outside. However, whatever kind of shape that takes, right? It could be the wilderness, it could be a ruin, it could be a structure, it could be space, it could be whatever, right? So the points here are it is like relatively unsafe and unknown. That's the important parts, right? So it's relatively unsafe. You don't have the resources the community can give you. You don't have the safety the community can give you. You're on your own. And it is unknown. You don't know what's out there, right? You have to figure out what is out there. You have to figure out how to get there. You have to figure out how to deal with any obstacles that you encounter, and so on and so forth. Right? These are the two parts. So, um, how is it about that? So, what kinds of mechanics do we need to make sure that this experience is actually delivered to the players? Right. Um, so we need something like uh, unpredictability. We need um, attrition, right? You get exhausted, you get wounded, you use up your resources, and so on and so forth. Um, to make you feel like, yeah, no, we're actually out here in the wilderness, and this is we need all of our wits and all of our stuff to be safe. It doesn't have to be lethal. This doesn't have to be old school D&D levels of, oh, if you've missed this check you die, or if you run out of food you die, or things like that. It doesn't have to be lethal. And that is something we can tune. But it should be like it should force or allow players to make meaningful choices by giving them clear consequences of what they're doing. Um right. So that's the unsafe part, that's the unknown part. Anything else that the system needs in its mechanics? Uh, mm, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that's it. As a higher level system, this is it. This is all it needs. And these two things combined will allow players to make meaningful choices. Right. So, what do the players do? And very important, this is the players. This is not the characters. This is not asking what the characters do. The characters are in the narrative. The players are sitting around the table or sitting in front of the computer playing the game. What do they do at the table? Right? So make decisions based on where they want to go and what it will cost them to get there. That's very vague. There's probably a better way to phrase this. It's not just where they want to go, but also like how to go there, right? What to explore, um, etc., etc., etc. But this part is what it will cost them or what they will risk, which is similar, but not exactly the same. But it's the same kind of decision, right? Um, so they have some sort of goal, and they have either different goals or a goal and different paths to get there. And they see, okay, what will it cost us? What will we risk when we do this action? And then they will make a decision on which action to pursue, which path to pursue. All right, and ads are going to play soon again. But this is basically the framework. And the rest is just having a system for it. A system that provides these things with allowing the players to play the game in this manner. Okay.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Let me try to brainstorm now. See what I can come up with. Use the ad break. Think. Mm. Uh, mm, let's see. I'm thinking about how to call this and what parts to include. Okay, so how do we determine? Okay, so we need to determine uh, how do we introduce unpredictability, and how do we calculate the attrition? So unpredictability is more is easier. So we have some sort of we need some sort of let me put it into quotation marks, a turn structure. And I'm putting into quotation marks here because the turn structure really depends on more detailed structures, systems. And on this higher level, turn might be too rigid for now. Right. It could also just be a day, right? You have a day as a single turn, and that can also work. And you do two things during the turn structure. You have, let me put them like this. You have random events, and you have Uh, I need to think if these are the same point or no. You have some sort of travel speed ish. Maybe. Uh, but no. Random events and calculating cost or uh uh cost or risk. So this one is relatively easy. You can say like, okay, every day that you're out there, I will roll and something will happen. Right? The GM will roll and something will happen. Um, and this is not random encounters necessarily. It could be encounters. It could also be things like weather effects. It could be things like your pack tears open and you lose a bunch of food. It could be, um, I don't know, maybe you find a fork in your path and then you have to decide which way to go. Or you find some sort of natural obstacle, like a river that you have to ford somehow. Right? So this is relatively easy. You just have roll die on table, and how you customize the table can also depend on where you are or how you're traveling, etc., how well prepared you are. That is highly customizable and very easy to test, right? What works and what not. Um, but you just roll a die once per the turn sequence, and that's it. And then you have some sort of random event. That's unpredictable. So good things could happen, bad things could happen, nothing could happen. You never know, and that is kind of the risk. And this calculating risk, calculating cost and such, is things like uh, using food or light, right? Or uh, like things like fatigue, right? You could have that. The easiest thing right now is just things like using food. If you, for every day you travel, you have to eat one ration or something like that, and then that's kind of something that players then keep in mind. Oh yeah, we use resources, and then once you delve deeper into other related structures, into more detailed structures for exploration, you can introduce more resources that you use. Um, and let's see, fatigue, and some of these could come from the from the results on this table. Maybe you enter a very area that's very difficult to traverse, and it takes you a bit longer to do so, or it tires you out. Right. You suddenly go into you go into a hailstorm or something, and that means you have to be more careful, or it becomes more dangerous to travel, or if you do travel, then you get hurt, and so on. Um, those are all possibilities. Uh, Also, though, I don't. Something I just thought of. It can't be too detailed, or not detailed, but you can't have too many things in there because at some point, the whole thing about this is that things are weird and players have access to weird powers and weird devices and such. And at some point, they will be able to circumvent these structures in creative ways, and that's good. Right, that is the players using or immersing themselves into the world and saying, yo, we have all of these weird stuff, why don't we just use it, right? It's kind of the same as using a teleportation spell in D&D in order to circumvent traveling for 3 weeks or something, right? Same basic idea. Um, but you embrace that. So you don't need to spend too much time on here. You spend enough detail and enough energy on this to make sure that the players understand, yes, there are risks and costs. We're doing things conventionally. And then choosing to use their abilities and resources to circumvent the entire structure is a meaningful choice, right? They choose to use their ability in order to not have to go through the random events and using up food and getting fatigued and blah and all that, right? That is a meaningful choice. Maybe they can only do it once because it was a cipher. That makes the choice even more meaningful, right? And that is good. Meaningful choices are good. As Sid Meier said, a game is a series of interesting decisions. Very important. So yeah, enough for players to understand what is going on and what they would face if they were to engage with the structure conventionally versus how they could circumvent it or maybe make their time easier. Okay, let's see. And then the turn structure would depend on things like on zoom level, right? So if you have overland travel, then the turn sequence would look different than if you are inside a ruin, for example. What else did I write? Maybe even combat, right? So this is something that's often done. You have the same basic structure, but then one of the bigger things that changes is just how long a turn is. Overland, a turn might be half a day. In a ruin, a turn might be 10 minutes or half an hour, right? In combat, a turn would be a couple seconds, right? Things like that. But a lot of the basic structure still remains the same. And that makes it easy to learn and easy to use because once you understand the basic structure, all you have to do is remember a handful of different details and then you can use that. Right? You learn one structure and apply it to many different levels. Depends on zoom level. But these are lower level structures. So this is the high level structure, and then you have lower level structures down here. Which, again, if you really want more detail in your overland travel, use the overland structure. But if you just want something, then you can move up a level and have something easier. And because Numenera has a difficulty system, you can use that, you can integrate that. You can have things like traveling through this. You can make rolls, right, during the day and be like, okay, at the end of the day, depending on what you traveled through, how difficult it was to navigate, or the kinds of dangers you have encountered, you make a roll. And the difficulty of the roll is determined by the events of the day, right? So, e.g., travel roll at end of day and difficulty. Oh my goodness. Difficulty is determined by events of the day. And that includes both random, unpredictable things like rolls on the table, as well as choices the players made in which path they travel, how they deal with obstacles, and so on and so forth, right? So you could have different examples or modifiers or other things that feed into this difficulty. And then you roll, and then you see, okay, how did that affect us? Are we fatigued? Did we use up more resources than thought, right? Did we get injured in some way? Or did we get lost? Or whatever else, right? Um, right? And then the result, well, I don't have to write. The result is the result, duh. Right? But that is, so I can write down result is consequences of random events plus player choices. Right? So that works. Uh, that gives players agency, but also makes travel not a math equation that you can just solve and pick the best course of action because of the randomness in there. And then that will feeds into stats plus narrative, right? Maybe you gain a level of fatigue, maybe you gain a wound, maybe you lose some resources, maybe you anything, right? And then how you deal with that is the narrative, right? Maybe you decide to turn around because traveling has cost you so much and you don't have enough stuff to get back home safely, and so on. That's possible, right? Um, that example just made me realize having this kind of a travel system um, actually makes the community the focal point, because the community is a safe haven that you are in. You build it, you run it, you help it grow, and then you go out into the wilderness and you do all sorts of things, and you get hurt, and you uh, lose items and use up food, etc. And then you always know going back to the community is good, is safe, we'll heal up, we can eat food again, we can sleep and rest, etc., etc. And that ties these two aspects together narratively. I'm starting to like this. It's very, very close to what I've been designing before, the old school game, but I don't mind. I think that can really work. Um, so it's not just two unrelated parts of a game. It's two parts that can be integrated mechanically and narratively, and that is powerful when that can happen. Um, right. So just have a random event roll, right? A way to uh, a way to determine costs. Right? Maybe you have a table of some sort. Maybe I don't know. Tables are very nice. They might help. Maybe you just have some basic guidelines and then modify them based on. Oops, what did I just press? Okay, based on, I don't know, what the GM things might fit and so on. And then at the end of the turn, maybe a day of travel, right? Or at the end of every encounter in a ruin, right? Or at the end of a combat round, or something. I don't know if how applicable this is, but you can roll, and that is a result that creates consequences and feeds into other things. So as a basic, there are no specifics, because specifics are a lot of just brainstorming ideas, filling out tables and such, and that is Um, that is really more of a thing of, oh, you want to play the game now, and then you also kind of know where the party will travel and what the environment is like and what kind of a game you want to play, and then you start filling out tables to fit your gameplay. Do you want it more lighthearted? Do you want it more grim? Are they in a desert as opposed to in a forest? Um, are they, I don't know, what kind of things do the party like to the players? What kind of activities do they like to do, and what do they want to focus on when traveling and so on? And that's when you start brainstorming ideas, because then you're sure the ideas that you fill your tables with are relevant for your players, right? That it's going to be things they enjoy, uh, things you can expect depending on where they are, where they're traveling, how they're traveling. Maybe they have access to a car, right? As we talked before. Then that will change a lot of how you engage with the system. Right? Um, so these are very specific. These are, like I said, almost like character options in the same ballpark. Um, and then I just very quickly want to, if I press this, ah, okay, very quickly want to just touch on the community structure. Wait, what did I call this? Exploration structure. Yeah, community structure. Community structure. And I think the community structure, again, go through this. What is the structure for? Um, Building and maintaining the PCs. Oops. Oh, come on. Home community. How is it about that? Oh my goodness, I can no longer write. Okay, I need to end sooner rather than later. And we have two parts here again. We have building and maintaining, but a lot of that can be relatively similar. So how is it about that? Basically you have it's this can be almost like a board game or a video game or so, right? That level of mini game where you have um like options to blah, 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 expand the community and um ways to manage it, including direction of growth plus dealing with events. And here, once again, we have this whole random event thing. Maybe you get raiders that want to raid your community. Maybe there's a natural disaster. Maybe some powerful Numenera in your community goes haywire. Maybe you suddenly have a certain sickness. Maybe you need to find a new source of food. Maybe you, whatever, right? Or maybe there's suddenly a political standoff happening. Someone else wants to become mayor, and there's a big campaigning thing happening, and all sorts of stuff, right? And many of these could be solved with role playing, or just adventuring. But having a way to generate them and having a way to clearly define the consequences, right? And both of these, right, require clear consequences because only consequences make choices meaningful. Require clear consequences that affect future of community, right? Um, so this is randomness. Again, you can't plan for this. This is things like resource management. Right. We only have so many building materials. Do we want to build this building or that building? We can't do both. Right. Or we only have this many people. Do we put them to work on this or that? Right. We can't do both. And this is things like uh, buildings, various structures. Oh my goodness. Devices, right? Numenera devices that you bring home or that you manage to piece together or so on or such. Um, Resources, right? Maybe you decide to mine, to start a mining operation, or maybe you decide to build a big farm or whatever, right? Um, right. And these all must have clear ways of players deciding which ones of these do we go for because we can see what they cost, but we can also see what they bring us. Right? And so it almost becomes like a base building board game or video game or something like that. So what do the players do? Well, basically what we just talked about, right? Um, Decide between different resource allocations to grant the community, oops, different different benefits, I guess. Right, and that's at the end of the day, that's the mechanical choice you're making. Right, we have enough building materials and workers to build one building. Do we build, I don't know, a forge, or do we build a school? Do we build a hospital, or do we build a farm? Right, that kind of deal. And you look at that and go, okay, we kind of know what each of these buildings will do. Maybe you don't know completely. That's possible, but you have some idea. You must have some idea of the possible consequences. Otherwise, you're not making a meaningful choice. Um, and then you decide on one of them, right? And and then you have to live with that decision. And also, deal with random events that happen, mostly through role playing. For instance, if there are raiders, then the characters can organize a a defense force and fight off the raiders, or they can try to negotiate with them, or whatever. Right? That's more open ended, but also allows like the players to drive the story of their community. And that's the basis of the community. Right? Everything else can be left up to more nebulous things like building relationships with the NPCs. Yeah, okay, you can do that. You can have a system for that. You can have a system for relationships and contacts and such, factions, political structures. You can, but you can also leave that nebulous for now. Crafting and such. Sure, you can have systems for that, or you can just say, GM determines a couple of materials and a difficulty, you roll, and then you see if it works or not. Right? Same idea. You can collapse back to the core resolution mechanic, and so on and so forth. So we can build more lower level, more detailed systems, but for a higher level system, I think this is enough. Right? Again, two broad areas that enable meaningful player choice. And yeah, ads are going to happen again. So um
Endure.
I
In
just
enduring,
realized
grow
something.
strong.
Ah. Okay. But yeah, I think I am going to call it soon. We'll just finish up this point I just realized. And then I've been talking for 3.5 hours. I think I need a bit of rest for my voice. Um but yeah, there's one more point I just realized. And gonna write that down so I don't forget. Then we can come back to that to this project next week. Or maybe later, right? Do some other things in between. I have so many games I'm working on. And there's also the possibility of doing a Q&A session of some sort, or have people suggest topics and so on. All right. Welcome back. All right. There's the last point that I just realized, and that is you can have a similar turn structure for community as well. You have community turns, right? You have exploration turns, you have combat turns, you have community turns, during which you have the random events, right? Every turn, however long a turn is, a turn might be a whole week or even a whole month, right? Uh, Something like that, quite long, so that the community doesn't get swamped all the time with we just had raiders 2 days ago, and now we have raiders again, and this is the third storm in this week, and blah. That this doesn't happen. And then you have actions that the players can take. Um, yeah, let's see. Maybe we'll see this. Okay, so actions, as in things like At the beginning of the turn, you say, "This is the current state of the community," right? And there are this and that many resources, this and that many people willing to work, able to work, etc. Um, how should we allocate them for this turn, for this month, right? And they can go, all right, wouldn't it be good if we built, I don't know, a clinic? It's like, okay, so let's do that. And then that is the action for the big turn, and then the players can choose to do other things for their PCs, like training a certain skill, building relationships with NPCs, um, I don't know, going out to adventure, right? Etc., etc. And then you can have other things, smaller things happening within the turn. Um, but then at the end, you can do various roles again, like the result of how did it go? Did we finish the clinic, or were there unforeseen circumstances? You can roll for random events, like did anything happen, or roll for the next turn. Right? Is anything going to happen in the next month? Well, the GM will figure that out and not tell the players until it happens. But that kind of deal. And yeah, and then so you kind of deal with a monthly, maybe a monthly month doesn't sound bad right now. Structure where you have some big decisions to make, and then after those big decisions have been made, the players can then decide how to spend their time. Right, going out to adventure in a ruin might take 2 weeks or so. Right, and then they come back to the community, and then there's a random event happening, etc. So that's definitely something that can happen. So choose big projects. Right. 1 month as an example. Choose big projects and then do other things such as now do other things in between. In oh my goodness. In between. Right. As an example, adventuring, uh, resting and healing, or various downtime activities, training a new skill, researching a Numenera, um, I don't know, yeah, socializing with NPCs. A lot of different things are possible. Um, yeah, and I think this is the basic structure. And again, what actions are possible? This is then a list of buildings and such, and what effect they have. Again, that's content, that's options. What resources do you want? Right? Do you want one resource? Do you want two? Do you want maybe a basic resource and then lots of exotic resources that the players have to go find? That's how the game currently handles it, and that's not a bad idea. What kinds of events might happen? Again, that also largely depends on what kind of a story you want to tell with the players and where the community is and what kind of community it is and so on, right? Very individualized. Um, yeah, I think this is not a bad place to stop. This is some. I'm gonna write down one more thing just so I don't forget, and that is one more kind of mechanic or system that I might want to look at. and that is an injury system. Injury system or like fatigue system and so on. I might want to look into that. Numenera has something akin to that ish, but with other systems that might feed into such an injury or fatigue system, right? Like traveling or a slightly more interesting combat, um, or heck, even community things like resting and such. I might want to look at an injury or fatigue system, but that's yet another system that more clearly impacts core systems. Okay. Um, I think that's it for today. Uh, Discussed a lot about what Numenera is and isn't, what I like and don't like about it, and what I want to change and how I want to change it. This is a lot more extensive than, I guess, quote unquote, normal homebrew. Um, but also, if you want to make sure that your homebrew doesn't break things and that your homebrew actually achieves what you want it to do, um, it helps to go through these steps. And this took a lot longer in general because I was talking a lot about it and rambling and ranting and so on. You don't have to take this long. Um, this is like if I was just sitting silently at my desk doing this by myself, um, probably would have taken half an hour instead of almost 4, right? Um, but I do this for you. I hope you have learned something. I hope this was interesting and that you're able to take something with you for your own homebrew projects, or just get a deeper understanding of tabletop role playing games and Numenera in particular, and the design process. I'm not sure yet what I will design next week, if I will continue with this or return to another older project or start something new again. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to see. Okay, let me switch to this scene. All right. Okay. Let me save and close. Okay. Right. Um. Yeah, this was quite a lot, but I hope it was interesting and enjoyable. Yeah. I will be back in 2 days. Saturday my time with some Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate 1, not Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 1, the original. We're also kind of sort of nearing the end on that one. And then on Sunday, V Rising, our weekly V Rising collab, and we're also nearing the end on that one, so I have to pick a whole bunch of new games to play. Oh, this is like just as the new year begins, we finish off a whole bunch of games, and then I have to search for new things to play. But that's okay. Not like there aren't enough games. Okay. Let's look for someone to raid. Let's see who is online. If my Twitch would deign to load, that would be freakishly awesome. Yes. Maybe? Okay, it's loading. So let's see who is online and who we can give a raid to. Uh, this the stream has been going for 5 hours though, so I don't know. I don't know if they're still gonna continue for much longer. Oh man, everyone has been going for a while. Yeah. Yeah, that's winding down, so. Yeah. So we are going to raid Bonnicula, who is currently streaming Lycanthorn 2, Reign of Beasts. I have no idea what this game is. So yeah, let's check that out. So raid Bonnicula live. Yeah. Bonnie, a really cool streamer, very, very active in supporting the VTuber community, doing a lot of good stuff. And also a lot of like very helpful in terms of things you can do with like Vinyang and if you're 3D VTuber and effects you can do like very well set up stream, lots of fun. So yeah, well worth a follow. And yeah, I hope to see you soon, maybe on Saturday or Sunday, maybe next week when we continue with more more design, more game design. Okay. I've been talking too much. Yeah. Take care and bye-bye.
Updated my journal.